So Pregones Puerto Rican Traveling Theater is the joyful union of two companies with two venues who had each very long trajectories of supporting their communities, one in the middle of the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood on 47th Street, and the other in the middle of the South Bronx. And those two companies, with those very, very distinct and rich histories, decided to join hands and become what is now the leading Puerto Rican theater company here in the United States, and continue to serve both those communities, but also look ahead into the future as to how we understand theater.
We found each other because of the work, because of the love we had for theater, because our missions were very, very similar, and then grew together, and then eventually saw that our future, that we belong together.
The Puerto Rican Traveling Theater began as the dream of this icon, Miriam Colón, who was already a very well-known or respected Hollywood actress who had done films with Alfred Hitchcock, became really good friends with Marlon Brando, and with a lot of that era of the actor studio. She was one of those first ones who were in the same room sharing a lot of the different ways in which we approach theater. In the mid-1950s, she was cast as the young lead in a very important show called The Ox Cart by René Marquez. And René Marquez loved what she did in that play. And since that day, he said to her, whenever you want to do this show, I give you permission to do it, right? So a few years later, there was a production that was done here in 1966 in New York City, starring a very young Raul Julia and Lucy Boscana and Miriam Colón. And that production was very successful. And that gave Miriam the idea of, I want to take this to the people that this show is actually about. The Ox Cart really narrates the story of this family from the countryside in Puerto Rico who, because of the economic circumstances, is being forced to move from the mountain to the coastal town in Puerto Rico, and then from there to New York City. That was the echo of what the Puerto Rican community was going through in the 1950s. So many of the people that this show was about couldn't come see that production. So Miriam said, you know what, let's take it on the road. And it was a huge success. And that's how the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater was born, out of that dream from that young woman who was passionate about theater, but also passionate about the history of the Puerto Rican people in that time. And that's how the company was born, as a touring company. We are in a very special room that is dedicated to the legacy and the trajectory of the great Miriam Colón. These are all her awards that she kept in her home, and we decided to build this place where she used to sit right here. This used to be her office. And we have some of her most favorite awards. For instance, the hairpiece that she wore as Mama Montana in Scarface is right there. Another one of her major films, Isabel la Negra, the same hairpiece, and she kept all of this in her home. The National Medal of Arts that was bestowed upon her by President Barack Obama, and this is the medal that she wore that day. And many of the keys to different cities and medals that were given to her, some of her film memorabilia as well. So this is very significant for us and the history of this theater. This is the original script of The Ox Cart, La Carreta, signed by René Marquez, the author of the play. And he dedicated this to Miriam in 1953. And this is the exact same manuscript she brought to New York. And she built the theater using this manuscript. So inside of it is full of her notes and her comments. But the most amazing is the dedication that René Marquez gave her when he handed her this manuscript. And so we opened it up and kept it here for people to see how this theater was born. It was born out of those pages. it really means a lot to have this space open so that we understand the magnitude of what one person can do in transforming her generation. I mean, she make sure that this theater was here, and to have this as a celebration of her allows audiences to also come in and rejoice in that and say, I am part of her history. I am part of what she talked about.
Miriam Colón is one of those figures that happens once or twice in a century. Miriam was, and it sounds cliche, but it was the mother of all of us, and not only because she, in her daily practice, protected her community of artists, protected the people who were working with her. She was so kind and visionary. She really was a dreamer. Sometimes things didn't work, and she would not be, she would not step back. And she was my inspiration and the inspiration of so many people who still, having worked with her 40 years ago, still talk about her. Pregones Theater started as a touring company, as a company that wanted to move from place to place with theater and experiences that we wanted to share. So back in 1979, I had this urge to, inspired by the Latin American popular theater movement, to explore street theater and explore sort of, political theater, guerrilla theater. I mean, things that had a message that was just right there. And of course, I knew of the work that Miriam Colón and the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater were doing. So two friends like myself, Luis Melendez, who has since passed away, and David Cromet, who's very active in our community still, we began to flirt with the idea of putting together a repertoire of Puerto Rican theater written by Puerto Rican authors, and just take it outside of the center of the city. And I remember then we were very daring. We were just going everywhere. We would perform in churches and on street corners and street fairs, but also people began to see us and inviting us to more formal engagements. And we one day said, I think we have a company. We don't want to admit it, but we do have a company.
¿Cómo se cuenta un cuento? Los cuentos no se cuentan de la nada. Por creernos el cuento, aquí llegamos a darnos cuenta que aquello era solo eso, un cuento. I always suspected I would never return to Puerto Rico. People have often asked me if I felt if I was Puerto Rican, and I've always said yes.
We have a very large repertoire of historical pieces that take a specific period in time, and we do a lot of research, and we are able to bring them out, like Aloha Boricua, about the migration of Puerto Ricans into Hawaii, Harlem Hellfighters with the Latin beat. Now The Beautiful Land I Seek, it all makes sense. And it's interesting that about The Beautiful Land I Seek, because it's not only that the people, when the people involved, the artists involved, and Janio and José Zayas, imagine that, all of that is that we have this idea, we have this piece. But then we thought, my goodness, the content and the theme is totally coherent with the history of our repertoire.
That was really nice. They're in the back.
I just haven't been around a lot of people the past few months. So please don't make me leave. I mean, you're such a good resource for this. I have other notes. What do you want to know? The Borinqueños court-martial, the hospital takeover, reggaeton going mainstream, cryptocurrency billionaires. They buy up the monastery in San Juan. They turn it into offices. You live.
Shut up! Shut up! Okay? Shut up!
I don't want to hear what you have to say anymore, okay? All right? When I hear you talk about things, it shakes me. I don't want to be any less certain, because certainty was all I had when I came on this trip in a parade of people and were coming in here one and one trying to rob me of it. Get out!
Are you still going to write about this?
In my play, two determined Puerto Rican revolutionaries are on the train from New York City to Washington, D.C. to sort of strike at the president in the name of Puerto Rican independence. And as they travel, they kind of become unstuck in time and space.
So Matt decided to write a play that's set on the train, in a train compartment, as these two men are headed to do this. But of course, the train is not a normal train. The train begins to shift and change, and it sort of turns into a sci-fi piece. The train is sort of moving through history, through Puerto Rican history.
And I thought so much about the United States' response to Hurricane Maria, and I thought so much about the question of, how often people would say, would sort of like lean on the idea of Puerto Ricans as American citizens as like a reason we should help them. The question of whether or not, for me, whether people really thought of people in Puerto Rico as American. That all came back to me in the idea of these two guys who wanted to raise awareness, who wanted to do something.
It is a piece ultimately about the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico. It's a beautiful, I think, history lesson, which not just talks about this particular relationship, but talks about the relationship between colonial powers and the colonized. It really deals with the psychology of the people who are colonized, and sort of, hopefully it engages the audience in the questions around what that means over centuries, basically. And why it works now, it's a piece about the question of resistance. In moments of crisis, when is it enough? When is it too much? When are people sort of asked to sort of take a stand? And what kind of stand do they take? In this piece, it's the stand that these two men take, Griselio and Oscar, is extreme, and obviously is not asking for us to do that, but I think it is asking the questions about what is the responsibility of a person to one's country and to one's family, ultimately, and sort of how do you keep your humanity in the middle of all that?
I wonder if there's anything good in here.
Sure. Oh, snap, pardon me for slamming open the door, but I thought for sure I've been to this place before. You see, all I did was follow the blood on the floor, but some other dude must have gotten dragged to the corridor.
I thought I had written like a really angry play, and I was determined. I was like, any impulse I have, I'm gonna put on the paper, and I'm not gonna go back and rewrite until I hit end of play, and it's just anything that I have, And so I think there's an element of that, but then I got it in front of an audience, and it was very funny. And I had such a because I thought it was going to be weird and kind of alienating, and it wasn't. It was people responded to it. That was such a relief.
He looks like a $10 bill. He looks Puerto Rican. Why are you speaking so rhythmically, sir?
Did y'all see him? Did y'all clap him? I wasn't expecting all this action. I'm beginning to wish that I knew who you two were. I'm really hoping that you two don't work for Burr.
I'm Oscar. Are you Puerto Rican?
The name is A-L-E-X, Andy-R, not to flex, but I'm a superstar. An immigrant from the warm Caribbean seas. The name is Hamilton. You don't want to mess with me. I'm partially behind our fiscal policy, so history will not be very hard with me.
I didn't know any of the founding fathers were so brown.
Well, some have theorized that Hamilton was a mixed background.
Does this change anything?
I don't know.
Well, on the one hand, it could be good to show a full participation of all people in the American project from the very beginning.
On the other hand, this showing colonized people lauding the foundation of America keep us from thinking about, for example, how many of these men, no matter what color they were, owned slaves. And does that make us complicit?
Would we even be having this conversation without seeing this face?
It's complicated, yo. Eliza!
Collapse. Boom. Leave it to there. Great. So I think you collapse it.
So this is a set right now for The Beautiful Land That I Seek. We are in the middle of loading and right about to start Tech Week. It's a very exciting moment where we get to see all the pieces coming into place. Right now we have a beautiful crew that is working at this. to make sure that we meet the deadline so the actors can get back here from the rehearsal room down here onto the stage. But this is our home. The Beautiful Land That I Seek is a show that is at the center of the reasons why we do theater. And I immediately knew that this is a playwright that deserves the support that a theater like ours can provide. And at the same time, it was also an opportunity to collaborate with two other organizations that we respect a lot, Latinx Playwrights Circle and Fault Line Theater, who have now become like our sister companies. Moments in history that people sometimes don't want to approach because they're either too sacred or they are moments in which may cause some sort of like division or the way that people look at life and history. And Matt went right at it, as an artist does, with his perspective. And they look at the way that that train becomes that vehicle where history continues to move forward, even though in each one of those compartments in that train, there are moments of questioning and rebellion and resistance, but the train continues to move together. And Matt was able to capture that in a way that I feel is really dynamic, really unique, and that it deserves to be seen by audiences.
How do you fire this gun, Chino? Just by pulling this little trigger? How many bullets are left, Chino? Enough for you? You! You all killed him! And my brother! And Riff! Not with bullets and guns! With hate! Well, now I can kill too because now I have hate! How many can I kill, Chino? How many can I kill and still have one bullet left for me?
No! Who's Chino?
There is something valuable and true in sort of in telling people that these cultural institutions are there for you as well, that they want to reflect you, that they want to show your stories, that they want to sort of embrace your existence. When you're so much of the cultural landscape does not show you, it can feel like erasure, it can feel like people are ignoring you. It can feel like the issues your communities face, both here and or abroad, don't matter and don't register.
Well, I think we have a very unique perspective as to what the American story is. It's tricky because we work in a different language, which can sometimes be really difficult to translate and to really get people to understand. But over the years, it's become easier. I think there's an excitement to the fact that people discover that we're not monolithic, that to create Latino theater is to actually sort of be receptive to a wide range of cultures.
I'm sick and tired of talking about metaphysics. We're just going to arrive, and we're just going to get off this train, and we're just going to follow our plan, knowing everything that we know.
So we give up. When we're this close.
No, we change it. We do better. We die showing the world.
Pardon, I'm terribly turned around.
I think when one speaks of American theater, one also speaks of the reality and the nature of a country that is built from so many different stories. And these stories are not necessarily the ones that a canon particularly supports or promotes or champions, but are the stories of everyone who says, I want to be part of theater. And I believe that the stories that our communities, Spanish-speaking communities and the Latinx communities in the United States, we have a lot to contribute. We have a lot of questions that we want to ask ourselves, and we have a lot of questions that we want to ask the field itself. And I believe that only when you support that first voice, when those questions come from the actual people who are living it, do those things then matter the most, and that's when the most connection is being able to create.
Some of the great Latino work that is happening today is generated not only by those who come, but also by the ones who have been here for generations, and all that energy that is creating in that fusion I believe that gives me a lot of hope, that we can begin to feel comfortable with multilingual theater, that we can feel comfortable with, the environmental soundscapes that we can create together.
The role of theater is not just getting the house, it's also supposed to be the cultivation of those creators, of those playwrights that are going to observe the situation of the Latinos right here in this country and in many parts of the world, and develop the ability to create a drama that can touch your heart or can touch your conscience. That's a big challenge, and we are still in that path. I have helped with putting more than half of my life in this endeavor